Okay, David John Walter, Petition of Right, pages 40 to 50. Finally back again. All right, so I'm just going to go through the main points that you need to comprehend from the David John Walter Petition of Right, which was written by David John Walter, who used to be an ex-police prosecutor, used to work for the police. And as well, he was witnessing in 19th of October 1973 when Queen Elizabeth signed above the seal the Royal Style and Titles Act 1973. Now, so here in page 41, we're talking about the privately elected Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk, MP, Chief Executive Officer of the Queensland Treasury Corporation, the state. Yeah, so it's a corporation. Yeah, so the Queensland government is the Queensland Treasury Corporation. As well, like every single state, they usually got 2 CIK number registered in America with the Security Exchange, and they got a number, the CIK. So you can look it up in the Security Exchange. You can look it up their numbers. Okay. Now, so basically, as you can see, the clergy and the bishops of the Anglican Church of Australia in Queensland are holding person-to-person contract in signed de facto relationship with the Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk MP, and she is the CEO, Chief Executive Officer of the Queensland Government, Queensland Treasury Corporation, and they're trading only in Australian decimal currency, which is a foreign currency, and it's not by the Constitution Act 1867, the Queensland one, which that's how it should be. It should be pound sterling and pounds. That's not what's happening. There is the ABN lookup as well, Department of the Premier Cabinet, State Government Entity, and this is the Anglican Church of Australian Constitution Act 1961, current as of 12th of January 1996, revised reversion, Anglican Church of Australia Constitution Act 1961. Interesting. All right. Do your own research, and welcome to the Anglican Catholic Church. Okay, so the current 27 November 2013, State of Queensland 2019, this work is licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 International License. Okay, so the seal of Anglican Church, you can see the cross again. This is important when you see the cross. Anglican Church is not restricted to Australia, and it's worldwide trading organisation, and the Clergy Anglican Catholic Church in Australia is a private Australian business. Run a private Australian business trading at real and personal property. Okay, so they got an ABN, the International Trading Corporation, and registered in the New York Stock Exchange. Boom! Yeah, so with the Australian government, which is a private international trading corporation. Now, New Tax System Act 1999. Okay, so what you need to do, there's again the ABN lookup for the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, Commonwealth Government Entity. There is a Great High Court case 2015 with Queensland Rail. Anyone who's got an ABN, they cannot be Department of the Government. They are a corporation and they fall under Contract Law Corporation Act 2001. Okay, so there we go, back to the Royal Style and Titles Act 1973. You really need to remember this act because that's when this is the private seal, called the fraudulent seal. That's when it started operating in 19th of October 1973, introducing the Queen of Australia, which is a foreign corporation registered in America and trading on the New York Stock Exchange. Okay. And the head of the Catholic Church is based on Rome, and doctrine of the Catholic Church and the laws of God are determined by head of the Catholic Church, worldwide the current Pope Francis. Now, the Anglican Catholic Church of Australia is a private registered Australian business, holding an Australian business number and international trading in Australian currency only. So it's not by or constitution, whatever state you are. So if you are in Queensland, you fall under the Queensland Constitution, the Constitution Act 1867 Queensland. If you are in New South Wales, you fall under the New South Wales Constitution Act 1855. If you are in Victoria, Victorian Constitution Act 1855, which is the money to pay, it's pound sterling and pounds, the legal tender, and it's not the Australian decimal currency. Now, 14th of February 1966, all have sworn to the private oath of allegiance to the Queen Elizabeth II, or Elizabeth II. So this is the fraudulent one. Okay, so that's not the Queen Elizabeth, the monarch who just died. Now, the Elizabeth II does not hold royal style and titles of the members of the registered political parties and living in Australia to be. So the defender of the faith. Yeah, so this was introduced in 1973. I always call it, that's when the big fraud started anyway. Now, Your Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II is the current holder of the Royal Style and Titles Act 1953. So that's when she signed under the seal. Okay, so holds the Royal Style and Title granted to you by your subject across the Queen's Dominion in 1953, defender of which was granted to Henry VIII. Now, State of Queensland 2008, this work is licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution International License. That's again, it's a private seal. Okay, so this is not the appropriate seal in Queensland. There is the EBN, you know, state government entity. Then we go in here, yeah, so page 45. Queensland Treasury Corporation is a private Australian business. Operation in Queensland and subject to the common law of Crown and operating and trading on the land of the Crown and subject to the Constitution Act 1867. And every person of the Queensland Government are personally held and accountable to the criminal law in Queensland as held to the Criminal Code Act 1899, which is still in place to this very day. I want you to remember, and that's the reason it's written important, this is on page 45. The book is already in the Anti-Corruption Academy Facebook page. It's on my Telegram channel as well. It's uploaded. Anyone would like to get it, you're more than welcome to message me and send me your email address so I can actually send it to you. Now, going back to the Australian Constitution, that's a private constitution with the Australian government solicitor. So the interpretation of the Constitution, connotation and connotation of its words should remain in constant. We are not give words a meaning different from any meaning which they could have borne in 1900. And any perpetuated law that is created beyond the powers of the Parliament is void ab initio and may be disregarded by anyone in the country. Okay, so after 1973, all the acts and legislations, they are statutory act, and you're more than welcome to ignore it unless you consent to it. This is an important High Court case. That's called the South Australia v Commonwealth High Court case in 1942. The statutory laws of the Parliament of Australia and United Kingdom are therefore invalid. If it's beyond the powers held to the Constitution Act, it's invalid ab initio. Australian Constitution is not an act of the Australian government and does not in manner or form override to become superior of the common law of England, assured by the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act 1900 UK. Again, another important, Judiciary Act 1903 and Crimes Act 1914, number 12, which is a public seal of the Australian and private Australian business, which is also sealed to the public seal Australian Constitution, Commonwealth of Australia. The Act is held by the current Chief Executive Officer, Corporation Scott Morrison. Right now is Anthony Albanese. So this is the Crimes Act 1914 is important as well, just to remember, especially Section 12 to 65. I strongly recommend you to read it. Now, there is a reference Act 1973. Just remember, no seals of the Australian government. Okay. So this one doesn't have the royal assent. This is a statutory law. Statutory law apply only to statutes and not for the living being or for the British subject. I refer to the Crimes Act numbers Act to amend the Crimes Act 1914, 96 in relation to the deportation of persons from Australia. Has no seal. Okay, so that's what I was saying. Has no seal. Remember the Royal Style and Titles Act 1973 was signed above the seal. Now, as the new Australian government being private international trading corporation and a private Australian business commenced trading in Australian decimal currency, only the Chief Executive Officer of the Australian government, the holder of the seal affixed to the Australian Citizenship Act 1948, could only represent Australian citizen in the Commonwealth, being inside the Council of the Australian governments only. Now, as of 14th of February 1966, everything went to the de facto government, de facto Australian government, so no private person being a member of registered political party inside a member of council, Australian government or COAG, commencing 14 can lay any private criminal charge inside the constitution of the political party holding the authority on individual registered member against any person on the land of the Crown for any criminal offence under the private Australian civil law of the political parties of Australia. So then again, this is very important in page 50, no judge, justice, magistrate being paid in the private salaries in Australian decimal currency, 14th of February 1966, hold no contract and the seal with the people of the company. And they cannot issue any charges, impose any fine in Australian decimal currency because they are not lawful magistrates and not lawful judges. Okay, so then for the last 54 years, common law rights of people, Commonwealth, which includes Your Majesty, pretty much it's the Australian courts are private Australian courts, so we don't have competent jurisdiction here in Australia. What we should have, under the Chapter 3 of the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act 1900, we should have competent jurisdiction, but we do not have it, unfortunately. So we are up to page 50, okay, and I will get back to you from page 51 till page 60.